Thank you, Fang. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You having a wonderful time so far at the conference?
Yes.
Awesome. FYI, Reese in the back is videotaping me. If you do not want to be in the videotape, I'm going to ask that you take a seat over there or just let us know. Anyone? Okay, awesome. Please get settled in. Welcome. Well, you may have heard a common recommendation for how you're supposed to resolve conflicts. And this will come as a surprise. Having a conversation with the person that you're actually having a conflict with. Now, how many of you have tried that? Me too. It didn't used to go very well for me. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You're having the conversation, and there's demands being made. One or both of you criticizing the other. Nobody understanding each other. Sounds familiar? Yes. All right. And then there's the counterpart of that, which you may do, or some people may do, which is you don't even have the conversation. Why? Because you're afraid of what the other person's reaction might be, and you don't want it to be that kind of a disaster conversation, so you avoid it. Or maybe you're in the conversation, but you're holding back. You're not really fully expressing yourself for those very same reasons. Fear of what the reaction might be. It might go south, so to speak. And so you end up with something very important to you that is unfulfilled still. And it's eating you up inside, right? Now, what would it be like if we could actually have those conversations in a way that felt good, like maybe even reasonably good, maybe not horrible, but reasonably good, right? Where you and the other person has a relatively positive experience. There's actual understanding going on. There's partnership going on. You have a sense of each other's needs, not just mattering, but you're tending to them, figuring it out. How would that be? Awesome, right? So this whole thing about having a conversation with the person you're having a conflict with, great. And it's not sufficient. It also requires knowing how to navigate those conversations. And to have the kind of conversation where you feel good about it and you're actually resolving things, from my experience, there are some key principles that will help do that. At least for me, they have. And when I learned these principles and I started practicing them, most prominently in 2003, when I immersed myself in the year-long Nonviolent Communication leadership program, I started having different results. First of all, I could anticipate conflicts sooner. I could anticipate when something was off in the relationship and address it sooner before it had all these ugly layers that make it even harder to work through. And second of all, I was able to know how to approach it in a way that we could really connect at a heart level and open our hearts. And thirdly, figure out what really matters and how to address it, right? So today, I am excited to share some of those keys with you so that when you leave here and you have those conversations with the person that you're having a conflict with, my hope is it's going to be a much more positive experience for you. Sound good?
Yes.
All right. And so 2 things. One is I want to share those keys with you through the container of a powerful experience I had with my brother where these keys came into play. And then I want to invite you to practice some of these keys. You'll see some handouts on your tables. That first page of the first sheet is kind of like a note-taking worksheet. So as I go through the story with my brother, I'll be pointing out different keys, and you can kind of jot down notes, fill in the blanks, and we'll go from there. All right. My brother and I grew up in the Detroit area in Michigan. We're about a couple years apart in age. And we're actually quite close growing up. We had the same social circle of friends. We went to camp together. And even as young adults, we went to the same undergrad university. And it was a commuter university, which meant we drove like 20 miles each way. And frankly, those drives were one of my fondest memories, because on those drives, my brother and I would share. We'd share about everything, mundane, petty little things, deep things, confide about what's going on in our worlds, and it was just very sweet. So we had a close relationship throughout. And something happened along the way, and I still don't know what, but one theory is, well, there were some transitions in our lives. So, for example, I graduated and moved to Ohio to go to grad school. So now all of a sudden, not only were we not driving together, we weren't even in the same town. And at the same time, his girlfriend of 4 years broke up with him. So there are a few things that shifted our relationship. We still kept in touch. We'd have conversations on the phone. It wasn't the same, though. So it wasn't that same level of closeness. So something seeped in, and I think over time, because the closeness wasn't there, there was almost a slight resentment that started seeping in, a bitterness. And, well, we tried to fix it. And guess what we tried to do? How we tried to fix it? We tried to have a conversation. So during my visits back home, we'd have a conversation. And guess how it went?
Not good.
Right. Not good. We were trying to analyze it. What happened? What went wrong? And what about this and you? And da-da-da. And we weren't understanding each other, and we couldn't figure it out, and yuck. But guess what? We cared about our relationship, that each time I would go home to visit, each time, guess what we tried? We tried to talk about it, and guess how it went? Not good. And now it was worse, because there was this added frustration, and each time it just got more and more frustrated. So now the frustration went to bitterness, and, criticism and bitterness, and eventually yelling and walking away, and it was just ugh. And that lasted about a couple years before my brother finally said, you know what? We can't talk. Let's just be civil. That broke my heart. I don't want civil. And each time we'd have a visit, he'd say, let's just be civil. And I cringed at the word civil. I knew we were capable of close, but I didn't know how to get from civil to close. So I lived with civil for, this is almost embarrassing, the next 14 years. I mean, a lot happened in that time. He got married, he moved to Chicago and then to North Carolina. I graduated, I moved back to Michigan, and then to Albuquerque for a couple years, and then to the Bay Area. Each time, civil. Until one of our family visits, after a cousin's wedding in our hometown in the Detroit area, we were sitting around the kitchen table at my parents' home. I was sitting, and my brother was sitting across from me, and my father was next to my brother. And we're talking, of course, civil. And somewhere in there was some kind of a difference of perspective that came up between my brother and I. And my brother said, oh, you just wouldn't understand, in that kind of a tone, right? And now my historic reaction would have been something like, what do you mean I wouldn't understand? How can I understand? You've been wanting civil. We haven't been talking. How could I possibly understand? And how dare you excuse me of not understanding when you've been wanting civil? But I didn't go there. This was not long after I had immersed myself in this nonviolent communication training, plus yoga teacher training and all this other. So I was about as spiritual as I was ever going to, had ever been. So I was able to, in the moment, lean on the first key principle I want to share with you today. And that principle is take responsibility for your needs. So the need that was very much alive in me for the 14 plus 2 years, 16. I want to be close. I want reconnection. I didn't think I could get that because I was living with this edict of civil. But because I got this principle of taking responsibility for your needs, one way to take responsibility is to make a request, a concrete, doable request that you think would meet the need. And the cool thing about taking responsibility, especially by making a request, is you're actually accessing your power. It's in that request that you're exercising power to meet your need. Now, a person may not say yes, but it's you're coming from that place, right? So that's what I did. I made a request. And it sounded like, I said, well, I'd like to understand, and we've been trying to be civil and we haven't really talked. How about we talk now? Well, we really can't talk. We tried that. It wouldn't go anywhere. It would just get out of hand. Guess what my reaction was? My habitual reaction was, really? After all these years, I'm giving us another chance, putting it out there in a very sincere way, and you can't even meet me there? That's going on inside of me. That's not what I said, because that would have been blame, criticism, right? You guys recognize that. You've encountered that in your lives. And instead, I leaned on another principle. And that other principle is to separate what's occurring from the meaning you're giving what's occurring, or your interpretation of what's occurring. What's occurring is, my brother said what he said. He said, well, that wouldn't work. It would get out of hand. My interpretation or meaning I was giving what he said was, he doesn't care. Now, I have the opportunity to separate those two things out. When I separate them out, now I might still give it meaning, because we're human beings. We give things meaning. But because I'm separating out the meaning, I can choose not to react from the he doesn't care. Right? Because if I react out of that, that's when it just doesn't go anywhere good. But I can be aware of it, and I can instead choose to respond. So now the question is, well, how do you respond? You're like, yeah, I'm thinking it. Well, that's where it brings us to that the third principle. It all falls together. So the third principle is to recognize and differentiate the difference between strategies and needs. So my need was what? Connection and closeness, right? What strategy did I put forth to help meet my need for closeness and connection? Right. Well, how about we talk now? Now, here's the thing. If someone says no, they're saying no to your strategy, that particular approach to meeting your need. And it's when you separate and differentiate needs from strategies that you can now hear that no as a no to just your strategy and not to your need. But when you glob together strategy and need and you don't differentiate, when you get that no, it's going to sound like they're saying no to your need and they do not care about your need. So by separating strategies from needs, I can hold the possibility, the probability that my brother doesn't object to me wanting closeness and having that. And I can hold that and stand in that and now deal with what his no is really about. He's saying no to the strategy. And here's another key that's not on the handout. When someone says no to a strategy, or which is, in this case, a request that you're putting forth, they're actually saying yes to a need of theirs. In other words, there's some need of theirs that wouldn't be met by that strategy. So I now have the opportunity to uncover what need of theirs is keeping them from saying yes to that particular strategy. And if my intention is to get my need and their needs met, then I am welcoming that no, because I am wanting to understand what need of theirs is do they have? So I can now formulate a different strategy to meet their needs and mine, and there is no conflict. Not at the level of needs. There's only conflict at the level of strategies. So that's what I did. I tried to tune in to what need of his is keeping him from saying yes. Let's try talking now. And I could infer from our track record of whatever many years, I guess not just his needs, but feelings. I was guessing he's probably scared. We had a little bit of harmony between us. And I was guessing he probably is scared we're going to lose that. And he probably had a need to protect whatever little harmony we had. I don't know if I was right, but it got my heart to open to him, even if I wasn't right. The fact that I was putting my attention on what his needs may be. And that did open my heart. And when your heart is open to your needs and the other person's needs, truly open, not just in your head, then the strategies flow out. So what came out of me was, well, how about we just try for 5 minutes? Dad will keep time, and either of us can end even sooner if we want. He said, okay. Wow. Okay, after 16 years, 14 years, we're going to get another opportunity? I was happy. I was ecstatic. Like, wow. He said, okay. So I want to pause for a moment here. The story does continue, and I'm going to continue. But do you see how that worked? I had now reformulated a strategy that incorporated his and my needs. He could say yes to it. I could have just been mad at him for saying no and interpreting it as he doesn't care. And then end of conversation, who knows, another 16 years. Now I have 5 minutes. I may never, ever get another 5 minutes in my whole life with him. How was I going to use my 5 minutes? How would you use your 5 minutes? Well, I leaned on something Marshall Rosenberg, who developed Nonviolent Communication, taught me. Some of you, does anyone know Nonviolent Communication? You've heard of it? Okay. He talks about the 4 components. You string them together, make an expression. All that's good. Those are like training wheels, however. They're a structure, but they're not the actual essence. The essence is dropping to the deepest part of your heart. What's your deepest truth of what's alive in you? What matters to you? Without judgment, without blame. What is that? So I looked at my brother. I said, I want my brother back. And I choked up. He started sobbing. I didn't need 5 minutes. 5 seconds was enough. And it was enough because there was no blame anymore. There was no criticism. My expression wasn't coming from that energy. It wasn't coming from, let's analyze this, let's figure it out. What did you do and what did I? No, none of that. Here's the intention. And this is important. The intention is, I am having a human experience. There's something alive in me. And my intention is to give you access to that. So I am letting you in on how I am experiencing life and what matters to me from the deepest place of me. If I express from that intention, it's a pure place. A person can come right in. And that's how powerful that can be. He was sobbing. I walked around, put my hands on his shoulders. I didn't get just 5 minutes. For the next 2 hours, he shared some very tender things with me. He shared about his marriage falling apart. He shared about how he regretted that he wasn't there for me when I had gone through some traumas. He was holding all of this. And because that wall came down, I now get to access what was alive in him. All this tenderness. This is what's possible. And these are just 3 keys, but these are 3 of what I consider very important keys. So I want to pause to hear from you before we move into having you practice. What struck you in that? Maybe something opened in you. Maybe there's a question or an aha. I'd just like to hear from a couple of you. Any shares, please? Yes.
So it wasn't words that opened up the access. It was the expression of emotion. Did I get that right? That allowed the reconnection between you and your brother. He started sobbing because you were sobbing first, or?
All I said was, I want my brother back. And I was choked up when I was saying that. It came from a deep, sincere, heartfelt place. So there's nothing for my brother to react to. There's nothing for him to defend or criticize. It's just this deepest truth. Sometimes our expressions may involve words. Sometimes they could just be silence. What's important is the energy, the intention that you're coming from, and actually expressing whatever will allow that person in on your experience in a genuine way.
So you actually made a request that you wanted your brother back. And so that triggered the emotions from him.
Apparently, yeah. Yeah. And you know, that's the thing about these conversations. I mean, Marshall Rosenberg offers a formula, and when I teach NVC, Nonviolent Communication, I train people in the formula because there's a purpose for the formula. It helps bring our attention to dimensions of the conversation that are strategic to include when you're expressing yourself. And there's this energetic piece, this intention piece. So yeah, we can break that apart and say, well, was that a request? Sure, in a way, but it was, it actually didn't fit that 4-part formula for those of you who know it. Okay, does that clarify?
But going back to principle 1, where you take responsibility for your needs, and you can do that by making a request.
Right.
So to me, that kind of ties in.
Right, you're trying to connect what I ended up saying with that first principle. In a way, yes. In a way, no. I expressed to him something that mattered deeply to me, and you can unpack that. I didn't actually make a concrete request saying, okay, can we meet? A concrete request would actually look like, can we agree to have a conversation once a week? Or, very concrete, doable. My original thing was a request, can we talk now? And when I got to that part of the conversation, that's not what was needed. And that's the other thing, is letting the overall principles and intentions guide what you say and not sticking rigidly with the formula. So the intention I had was, what's going to connect us? And so that's why I chose to say what I said. Over here, please.
I think one of the key things that happened was the going
I suggested it, and I suggested it based on tuning into what need of his I thought kept him from saying yes to my original request. So my original request was, well, how about we talk now? And I was guessing, well, that may feel too much, like he may be scared that it'll get out of hand and it won't be manageable. We won't actually connect. So because I was intuiting that, now it doesn't mean you're just left to intuiting it. When I teach a fuller workshop, we talk about how can you actually guess and find from the other person. You might need to use words to clarify and confirm what is actually going on. And that may be a process in itself. In this example, it was pretty instantaneous. Yes, here.
What's interesting is years ago, I was married. I had a little exposure to NVC, to Nonviolent Communication, and I tried it with my wife where we were having some troubles. And she said, I don't know, this doesn't feel natural. This feels contrived. She didn't like it. And clearly what was going on as I look back on it just now is that she was objecting to my strategy. I wasn't doing it right, or I wasn't doing it in some way that she didn't like. And so I interpreted it as she doesn't want to talk. And how great it would have been if I had said, I just want our relationship back. And let's find a way to do that as opposed. She just put up a block to this particular strategy that wasn't working for her. It would have been really interesting to be able to not pull back as I did and to actually lean in with a different strategy that met her needs. So it's really interesting.
Good, thank you. I know Arzi had her hand up and Sarah, and I'm wanting to, is it urgent to be able to move on? Because I want to make sure you have time to practice. So, and then we can also confer later. So I wish I could say all my conversations go that well and powerfully, but they don't. I still struggle sometimes. They are overall much more graceful than they used to be, which is great. And I'm sharing this as a way of saying it's a practice. And that's also why I'm going to invite you to practice. A couple things. One is on the back side of that first page, which is page 2, I want to just orient you to this tool that I've created here to support your practice in your life. Okay, so this is more or less what my story that I shared modeled. So you can take any reaction that you're having with somebody. You start with where you are. You're having a reaction, that's where you are. And so there's a space there, and you probably need more space if you're like me. You need like pages and pages to get your reaction out. I was trying to make this a one-pager, right? So just 2 lines for this handout. So you write out whatever your reaction is, raw, uncensored, and then you use that as a springboard to look for the what occurred, which is in that first key, right? What actually occurred, separating it out from all the meaning you gave it, and write that down in the next line. What is the actual trigger? And one way to help you do that is, what would a video camera pick up? What did you actually hear or see? And try to write that in as objective language. Then you use that as a springboard for the next 2 pieces, which is going inside. What's alive in you? How is life living inside of you in the form of feelings and needs? And once you spend enough time with that, take as long as you need with that, then you may be ready to then try to guess what may have been alive in the other person, that they did or said what they said or did. And guess, well, what might their feelings or needs be? And I used my brother's story as an example so you can kind of map it out when you use this handout. And I would say keep doing that until you do the litmus test toward the bottom. Where is my heart? So this is a check. Is my heart open? Am I really ready to care about the other person's needs as my own? Or am I still wanting to demand my way? And if you are, keep circling back to the top of the worksheet and keep going until you get to the heart part. Your heart is lighter and open. And when your heart is open, then you might think of, well, what strategies, what requests can I make that would embrace my needs and what I think their needs are. And I'm going to take it a step further. Often, I think we have these conversations sooner than we're ready. So I would advise, of course, there's many variables. Sometimes there's, the conversation is, you're in it, okay? But if you have the opportunity to do some of the homework first and then engage in the conversation, I'm guessing it'll be much more successful, okay? The reason, I toyed with having you practice this here, and I realized, you know what? You can do this on your own, and there's a risk that you might run of coming from your head and thinking, well, what do I think my feeling is? What do I think my need is? What do I think that person's feeling is? And what I'd much rather do is create a space where you get to practice this tuning in muscle. And that muscle I'm calling empathy. Marshall and others call it empathy. Fang, how much time do we have? I know we're off schedule, so my mind is it like 10 or 15? 15?
11:09, we hope to definitely wrap this up before 11:20.
Sorry, at 11:20?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so here's empathy. How many of you have heard of empathy? How many of you have practiced empathy? Okay. How many of you could use more practice? Good, okay. Here's how I like to think of empathy. You heard me refer to having a living experience inside, right? I only have direct access to what's alive in me. I can kind of go inside and see, well, all right, how am I experiencing life right now? I don't have direct access to anybody else on the whole planet. And to me, empathy is a way for me to access it. I mean, if I just evoke my curiosity, like, wow, I'm having an experience right now, but what is this experience of this other person? And if I bring that to the other person, I am now in empathy. So there's different levels of empathy. That first and foundational level is our presence. And in order to bring our full presence, it also takes emptying ourselves out. And what we're emptying specifically is our ideas, our opinions, our judgments, our expectations. We're emptying out the wanting to fix it and do something about it, analyze it, all of that, right? So similar to what I was saying earlier, is like my intention is for the other person to let them in on how I'm experiencing life. It's the same idea, but now the other direction. Your intention is, how is this other person experiencing life? That's it, just to get that in my bones, in my spirit, in my heart, in my body, not to do anything. So with that intention, I'm going to invite you in a moment to work with a partner and practice this. There are words we can put on it, but I'm going to ask you to not use words. Just practice the presence part first, okay? So when you partner off, decide who will be sharing first. And that person, you can share about anything. You can share about your day. You can share about how was breakfast. You can share about something deep, something challenging. It doesn't matter, light, mundane, whatever you want. And the person listening is really showing up from that empathic presence, okay? And those of you who've had some exposure to NVC or feelings and needs, if you want to silently guess what needs and feelings that person may be expressing, whether they're using words to say them or not, but you're training your mind, your heart, to look for what needs are being met or unmet that they're expressing. Does that make sense? Wow, breakfast was great. I'm going to guess silently, okay, that maybe that person is feeling satisfied and then their need for nourishment is met. Or beauty, I don't know. So you can play with that, but just even practice that presence part. And then we'll come into complete silence again, and then I'll ask you to switch. Are there any questions about the practice? All right. So go ahead and find a partner. We'll take 1 minute, and I'll call time at 1 minute to bring us back into silence. You have a partner? Anyone not have a partner? How about, do you, okay. There's Phil could use a partner. Maybe one of you can partner with Phil. Okay, thank you. Anything at all. Okay. So first person begin. 1 minute. First person, bring your share to a close, and let's have you come into silence. Coming into silence. And now switching. So switching roles, and go ahead and take the person who is just empathizing, listening. Go ahead and share for 1 minute. The other person listening empathically. And finishing up your share, coming back into silence, coming into silence, stay with your partner in silence, and with silence, just silently express some gratitude, whether it's a nod or whatever, some way just appreciating that this person let you in, or the other person allowed you to be let in. Just express that thanks. Okay. Well, thank you. So let's come back, bring our attentions back together to the large group. And I'd like to hear some very quick shares about how that was on either side of that, the sharing or the receiving part. Any ahas, anything? Yes.
I really enjoyed just going into her experience, just feeling like I was in her. As she was writing her heart, and she was experiencing things that I felt like I was
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. One more share, and then we're going to see the red card, so we're going to wrap up. So yes, please.
Listening and trying to empathize, it triggered me to ask more questions. I want to know more.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So here's the thing. We do need to wrap up. There's a feedback form, that last page in your packet. I would welcome your feedback. Some of you wanted to share. Please offer your share in writing. I'm also inviting testimonials. I have business cards, so those of you who didn't get to ask your question, feel free to take a card. Give me your email address. We can stay connected. If you give me your email address, I also have a free gift for you. It's an 11-minute video I created, harnessing the power of emotions in 3 key steps, 3 simple steps. So that clipboard is there with the sign-up sheet. Feedback form, feel free to reach out, email me with questions, whatever, shares, ahas, anything else like that. And at this point, I'm going to turn you guys over back to Feng.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to thank for the great presentation. And on behalf of District 57, just like to present a little gift, a little token of appreciation. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. And all of you should have received an email.